Assalamu alaikum everyone, we're back. Another episode of the Eon Podcast. We are joined today by none other than Bro Haji.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum to the audience.
The very not controversial
No.
Haji.
By all means, not controversial.
Now,
anything other than controversy.
For the sake of the audience, for me today as well, it was the first time when I discovered the name of Bro Haji. Bro Haji, what's your full name?
So my actual government name is Muhammad Naeem Saftar. But Muhammad Naeem, if you want to call it Arabic, Saftar being obviously my father, and Muhammad Naeem.
And brother Naeem is, or Bro Haji as we like to call him, is from Pakistan technically.
Technically, yeah.
He's from Kashmir.
Yeah, Kashmiri background and Jhelum, Punjab.
And your mother is from Jhelum, and on your mother's side you're from Jhelum. So technically we speak the same language.
That's right. The
Potawari Punjabi language.
That's correct.
There's a joke that we have on the podcast that North Punjab is taking over the Dawa scene.
Okay.
It is everywhere, by the
Mashallah.
way, even in English and in Urdu.
Allah.
A lot of the big dais are from North Punjab now.
There's something in the water, I think. The 5 rivers.
But Bro Haji, you grew up in, and we were discussing this before the podcast as well, you grew up in the UK in the 90s.
Yes.
In Birmingham, born and raised,
Born
right?
and raised, yeah.
So, I mean, the diaspora early on had a place to settle into. And now I think, even though that the UK is one of the most successful Muslim diasporas in terms of, this building communities, maintaining religious identities and so on, now even people like you who would have grown up there are skeptical about that.
Of course.
What do you think is the future for the Muslim diaspora, specifically in the UK?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. For me, being born and raised in the UK, living in inner Birmingham, where the majority of the diaspora have settled, I've noticed our fathers, especially when they came, weren't highly educated. But one thing they did do, and I have to give them credit for, they kept their religious identity. The little they knew, they put us into the madaris, they made us, keep to the roots, the principles of our religion. And we weren't separated from that, even though we are very culturally attached. So sometimes there's a fine line between culture and religion in the diaspora to maintain both. It was a great place to live, like Birmingham. Yes, it comes with crime. As you know, the UK has a lot of crime, drugs and whatnot. But tabarakallah, I think my generation especially, I can't speak on behalf of that Gen Z right about now, but it was a pleasant time. We had a good community, a thriving community, entrepreneurship as well. Like many of our brothers and uncles and fathers opened up businesses. So we did integrate into the UK community very well. And we have maintained a good cordial relationship. Have we integrated fully? Not exactly. Now, post-COVID especially, it's spiraling out of control. It's really bad. Like holding, unless you've got job security, whether you're working in civil service, like myself in government, or you've got let's say you work in the NHS, even that's even tipping the other way. Muslims in the UK are looking to actually leave, which is a sorry reality.
Is it Muslims across the board, or are we speaking specifically about Desi Muslims?
I would say mostly Desi Muslims, but not to say that we don't have Muslims from other ethnic backgrounds, whether it be the Afghans or the Bengalis, or because Birmingham, where I'm from, it's not that multicultural as London. London, you have all sorts, the Arabs and all sorts. But in the UK, in Birmingham, where I'm from, the conversations are being had. I feel this place ain't for us no more. More so because we have kids now.
Why specifically post-COVID, do you think? Because I've heard one of my cousins, he was here recently, and he was also saying that everyone's lost their mind in the UK after COVID. I
don't know. I think they kept us with lockdown, and we were just in our houses and we couldn't even go out. It just, even having a haircut was prohibited. It's like living in a really, like you could say, a dictatorship, like a military dictatorship. You can't do this, you can't do that. Which I understand the reasons why it was to stop the spread of COVID, but it just, I think people started getting entwined with, okay, I don't feel comfortable in the UK no more. And I think that experience and living amongst different, COVID was one thing, and then post-COVID you had tiers. So what you had with tiers, like certain areas had a more stronger cases of COVID, so they couldn't come out, and then they raised the level to high to low. It was just so uncertain that no one really wants to go through that experience again. And then the finances, businesses flopped. It's not really thriving as much, so everyone's just feeling the pressure. And Pakistan or whatever it may be seems like a positive alternative now for Muslims.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this to you earlier as well, that we've had a lot of serious re-immigration.
Yeah, you were saying.
We could call it re-immigration, I guess, where a lot of people who might have gone in the 60s or 70s might have been born in the 80s or 90s in the UK. I mean, their parents went
Yeah.
in the 60s and 70s because of their religious upbringing and because they've moved past the point where, with your parents, like you mentioned, they taught you up until a certain point with
right.
regards to the tradition.
That's correct.
But the younger generation, the millennials especially, have advanced beyond
Yes,
those points
yes.
with the internet, access to shuyukh,
And
to
integration with
books,
other Muslim communities as well.
communities. So there's been a cross-pollination of ideas, and they've sort of grown out of that.
That's right.
Of a more, maybe that was more palatable at that time for the UK scene.
Mm-hmm.
So now they do want to create a separate or a new Muslim identity.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in the countries of origin, sometimes in other countries.
Yeah.
People look at Malaysia a lot. I've seen
Yes.
online.
I know one or two people have migrated there.
Have migrated. Turkey was a big hotspot in the 2010s, I think,
Yes.
pre-COVID. Still, there's a significant amount of the
Yeah.
diaspora that's moved to Turkey. And other countries, inshallah, they seem to be being populated quite quickly. But what's funny to note is that the reason why a lot of people moved there was for the superior bureaucratic structures that were more convenient, and there was a better dispensation of taxes and development and what have you.
Economics played a huge part.
But it was the same sort of structures that started to cage you in COVID. And an efficient bureaucracy means you are efficiently at home
That's right.
during COVID. So now they're looking back at home and they're like, maybe the government shouldn't be so efficient.
I understand what you're saying. And
Maybe they shouldn't be so good at monitoring lockdowns.
And you mentioned a good point about like the Islamic awakening, and now almost touching 40. I'm 39, and I've noticed, Tabarakallah al-Azim, that the religious commitment, and as you said, our parents taught us up to so much. Like they only knew what they knew, and they cascaded it. All the additional studies, that we have so much institutions, and there's a religious commitment which is strong in the UK. And I said this to you off camera as well, that I think UK is the hub for the Islamic awakening. So much madaris, so much ulama, so much huffaz. And whilst that's being said, moving over or crossing over into the Islamic lands, we want to keep that identity, but at the same time, we want to have as you said, the bureaucracy, the first world influence. So we're trying to find that balance. Qatar, Dubai again, that's a different discussion, but some sort of Islamic flavor.
Dubai would be more of the same, no?
I agree, but I think there's certain, connections with Dubai that has, which is not suited for many people's lifestyles.
Yeah.
It's very, capitalistic.
Yes.
And alhamdulillah, I also want to make that move sooner rather than later.
Inshallah.
Obviously, I'm in Lahore now. Tabarakallah al-Azim. It's a beautiful place, I was saying to you. And Pakistan, connected to my home roots, it's natural that I feel more attachment. Even though I told you, I'm married from Morocco, and I've been to Morocco many times, like probably over 15, 20 times. And I do love Morocco as well. So it's now finding, where do I go? Do I come home, or do I go to Morocco, or even the other Arab states which are, thriving economically? So it's a decision that needs to be made, and a lot of Muslims in the UK are contemplating. It was never the case, I remember 10, 15 years ago, that, we're going to eventually have that conversation, which Islamic lands we want to make hijrah to. Never. Like in my early 20s, late 20s, going to my 30s, that conversation was very rare. It's on the tip of everyone's tongue right about now. On the tip of everyone's tongue. And that shows that, especially our Pakistani brothers and sisters who, look up to the West, like, England, and, you know what I mean?
England,
I assure you, you're better off here. Yes, if you have a certain lifestyle that, you're pro, liberal, and you have capitalistic sort of urges, and you want to have a good life, then yeah, if you're a professional and you feel that that's a decision you want to make, but you got to look at it overall. Your kids' upbringing, the society you live in. Knife crime in the UK is highest. Anti-immigration, you must have heard about the riots recently in Birmingham.
Yes.
So there's an all-around, there's an atmosphere of uncertainty, and it's not what it was 15, 20 years ago. So bear that in mind, whoever's considering, think about
specifically when they're thinking about the UK as a potential.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even here, I think a lot of people now only want to go there and work for a little bit, earn some money, and then come back. People don't want to stay there anymore.
No.
Other than COVID, what do you think is the big motivator? You mentioned some, like the uncertainty, the government structure sort of, collapsing in on themselves, and the sort of very racist anti-immigration tendency that's coming up. Is there anything else that's irking people there?
One important issue that the UK Muslims are fearing is the extreme liberalism, LGBT, teaching kids, and even the actual, British population are opposed to that. And there were some protests about, mandating, these sort of studies on children, from 3 to 4 to 5 years old. And I've got a 3-year-old and it is scary, and whilst we mentioned the finances, Islamic awakening and liberalism and also this is also having a major impact on Muslims living in the West, that they are making it compulsory and even forcing it down children's throats about, the extreme, far left LGBT, methodology upon children. I do feel that it's gonna transpire. How soon, I don't know, but it's heading that way. And you could see as well from watching from Pakistan that the UK Muslims are re-immigrating, like you said, because of those reasons I mentioned earlier.
I mean, in the final analysis, then this 50, 60 odd year experiment of the European Muslim diaspora, let's call it that.
Yeah.
A lot of good has come out of it. A lot of the modern Dawah scene, a lot of the major religious sort of Islamic awakening movement, it's been brewing in the West.
That's right.
In your assessment of things, where does the Dawah scene stand, considering that a lot of the major players want to leave the West?
Yeah. I always find that Muslims will keep the Dawah continuous, or it will be continuous. It won't be as if all of us will pack up at once and leave for good, because there has to be some element of Muslim influence within the non-Muslim countries. And as you know, the statistics show that converts or reverts to Islam is growing in huge numbers.
Yes.
And that was post 9/11. Let's be frank. The propaganda and the war on Islam. Using buzzwords like, and I don't want to mention here, but starts with a T and ends with a T, or even the extremist labels, have really sprung the curiosity of the actual UK natives to research more about Islam. So there is going to be some brothers in the Dawah scene that might end up leaving, but I don't have that fear that it will be just like everyone packs up, like Idi Amin told the the Indians to leave Uganda, and all of a sudden they all packed up. It won't be like that. But as I said, it's a decision that each family has to take, depending on their circumstances and what they feel is best for them.
Are you happy with the Dawah scene where it stands today? You have a lot of gripes. Yeah, anyone who's seen Bro Haji on YouTube knows that Bro Haji has a lot of gripes with the Dawah scene.
I do.
To play Dawah's advocate.
Yeah, play
here,
Dawa, not devil's advocate.
To play Dawah's advocate here is that all of those gripes notwithstanding, there is an overall khair that has come from the UK or the European or the Western Dawah scene.
That's right.
And doesn't it feel a bit nitpicky when you point out?
I could see that. I could see that.
Do you feel pedantic a little bit?
No, and I'll explain why I have a strong opinion about calling Muslim brothers and sisters to account. Most of the brothers, obviously, not the sisters, but the Dawah scene of those.
But sometimes the sisters too.
No, I have because of and those are speaking about lewd and illicit topics, right. Which really is not befitting for sisters. So we have to we have to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. And I do find that having access to the Islamic classical texts, and we want to show Islam to be the source of all happiness, not what suits the West, and not what we want to adopt Islam to Western standard narratives. And even the Orthodox, let's call them out as they are, like the Salafis or the Wahhabis, where they believed they had a monopoly on the text. So it was selective translation. And I find that my videos have opened up healthy debates. And as you've been based in Pakistan, one topic in particular we're going to get to has opened up a very healthy discussion. Not to say that everything's in my favor where everyone agrees with me, but it has given it's a platform that people have now opened up this forum.
So you see yourself as adding to the dialectic and sort of forcing the debate onwards.
Yeah, and having a healthy discussion, in fact. But sometimes you have to remember many brothers who've adopted a certain theology or a certain methodology are quite forceful with it. So sometimes if you take the Tawah, their humble approach, it's not going to have an impact. So sometimes me being outspoken, like you mentioned, having gripes with certain du'at, and it's brought I believe certain of the brothers that I have spoken to have changed and tweaked their views a bit without giving me the credit. But that's not really the main reason. I do find that I want to be held to account. Like if I've released a video and I've made mistakes, you think I'm going to have any gripe with someone saying, Haji, per evidence, this is what you said, it's incorrect? We all have to hold each other to account. And I do believe that's healthy.
But I mean, you have a lot of complaints and critiques about the Salafi Dawa scene, which has been the predominant form of European or Western style Dawa.
Yeah.
It has been fairly successful. And I would say it would account for 70-80% plus of all conversion to Islam.
I would say so, yeah.
But given that, doesn't it seem a bit pedantic and nitpicky when you I mean, if you're coming from the Hanafi tradition and we respect that, obviously Pakistan, South Asia is like the hub of the Hanafi. We're like the center of the Hanafi lands, I guess.
We were proud of it, aren't we?
But given those considerations, do you feel like you're getting into campism, where you're not campism, but like groupism, sorry, where this is my camp and this is your camp, and there's an element of almost professional jealousy with your camp and the work that they've done.
Yeah, it can be perceived like that, but one thing I have to add is very important as well, is that I am a Hanafi in jurisprudence and I'm Athari in creed, meaning Athari Salafi. So from a creedal and from a methodological perspective, I align more with Salafi. So it's not that I have a gripe with their theology, it's their geopolitics and how they abuse the text. And everyone that has jealousy for their deen wants to have Islam spread with pure justice, not because of sectarianism. Do you see what I mean? So Salafism, Atharism, it's aligned. So it's not jealousy. Okay, I've got a Hanafi connection. It's not a Hanafi Salafi issue. It's more to do with issues that affect Muslims day to day because of their harshness, because of forcing certain theological discussions which the layman shouldn't really be dwelling into. And that's the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I don't believe that I don't want the average layman to feel disturbed, that they are being pulled to a corner. What do you believe? What do you believe? There has to be certain steps to take.
You think that it's the Salafi inquisition of where they've made Tawheed into such a big issue that the average person is confused by it?
Tawheed, we all have Tawheed. We all worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, okay, if you venture into, dua li ghayri lillah, istighatha, tawassul and istishfa', these are technical advanced topics.
Not for the layman.
Not for the layman. Okay, there is ignorance, amongst, and again, in the subcontinent and elsewhere, that you'll find certain people or groups or individuals that have certain approaches to Islam that is rooted in culture. Being in Pakistan, you know how our fathers raised us. And sometimes we have to, with hikmah, with wisdom. So Tawheed, ya'budullah, we have to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. This is in our DNA, this is within our blood. But what they've done is the far'i, the furu aspects of Tawheed. They force it down people's throats where, I assure you, when I was growing up in the 90s, when I was walking in the city centre and brothers got their stalls, I was naturally happy, saying, mashallah. When I'm 14, 15 years old, brothers with beards, revert brothers, very happy to see them propagating Islam. But then when you go to the stall and you pick up a leaflet, it's like I'm getting interrogated. And that's what they were doing for decades. And then they had a monopoly on the internet with petrodollar money. It's true. If you put an English masail or a question in English regarding any Islam
Q&A,
it'll come Salafi inclined, or if not, Salafi websites will be, the algorithm will
Islam
pull it up.
Q&A,
any Salafi websites, they've had the monopoly over it. So me, studying with them as well, I studied with a graduate from Medina, Salafi Athari inclined. I have to be fair to myself and say the Salafi Dawah, whilst having certain traits that are praiseworthy, they have issues that need to be corrected. And the approach is the main issue, their harshness, their aggressiveness. And that's what I can
Do you think that now that the Saudis have sort of backed off of the Dawah scene with the petrodollar and the Saudis are busy with other things now?
Entertainment.
Entertainment primarily. Do you think that the Dawah scene has softened and it's becoming, or do you think it's still going on that initial inertia?
They don't have that glamour, that shine that they had before.
Anymore,
Not
yeah.
anymore. And that's kind of to do with predominantly me calling them out on their, go-to topics, whether it's Khuruj, whether it's Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, whether it's Tabdi', whether all these strong topics that they had a monopoly over. It's nothing to do with that. I do believe that people have started to wake up and said that this is just not sustainable. It's not.
Yeah.
And we're not saying go to the Yasir Qadi liberal modernist. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you have to be wasit. You have to be mutawassit, in the middle.
Yeah, it became a point where the Salafi Dawa scene had two products, and it became sort of a pyramid scheme where you could become a Salafi Da'i or you could become an ISIS fighter. That was sort of the
Da'ishi or that strand, Ikhwani or strand, Sururi.
Yeah.
So the Salafi Dawa has to, like, you look inside, you clean house, don't you?
Yeah.
And many of the Salafi brothers that I know accept this reality that there's a huge divide. Like Yasir Qadi, and I'll keep mentioning him, is that he went from a typical Salafi Najdi Wahhabi to a almost outright liberal, secular, Western dwarf in that side. Like there's no middle ground.
Don't you think that's an unfair characterization of his intellectual journey?
He's definitely fallen. Not to say he's gone from one extreme to another in a heartbeat, but he's gradually phased to that. He's gradually phased. He hasn't moved towards the right. He hasn't moved towards the left in extreme pace, but he's heading towards that. Like comments such as the Sharia, the Hudud shouldn't be implemented. Like typical Hudud, penal code within the Islamic injunction or in the Islamic Sharia. He's opening up a debate which is Protestantism, in my opinion.
But what does the Muslim world care about a Muslim American? Like, I mean, he's
influential. I
mean, without a doubt, he's influential, but consider the circumstances that they're living in. These kinds of characters, like with Sheikh Yasir Qazi and with Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, and you call them, and with Omar Suleiman, you call these people modernists or
Protestantism.
You can argue that it's a kind of Protestantism, but don't you think that it also arises from a desire to integrate their communities, their followers into their respective societies? Would you think it's appropriate that if you had the same style of Salafi Dawa in these communities now, and as opposed to leaders like Omar Suleiman or Yasir Qazi, wouldn't that be like a path to self-destruction for a lot of these young men and women?
It's debatable, of course, but at the same time, the alternative isn't the desired result either.
You think they're throwing out the baby with the bathwater?
Exactly. It's a reaction. And I do hold, and we've had this conversation before, that, and I'm speaking about Desis now because I'm in Pakistan and I'm a Pakistani myself, that there's a huge issue with inferiority complexity. There is. We feel inferior. We have to adopt. So we're living in the West. I live in the West. I find so many du'at, even ulama, catering to fit Islam to Western secular standards. And they don't do it explicitly, they do it subtly. So they'll twist the text. They'll give it religious justification. Anything possible to conform it. Not as if they're doing it for the best of the Muslim community, thinking about the Muslim community. It's about feeling that Islam needs a change. Islam needs to be tweaked. Islam needs to be reformed. That's the issue. And that issue, unfortunately, is very prevalent. And I don't know if you find it here in Pakistan, but in the West, it's been very...
We find it here as well, obviously.
So what's the solution? The solution is that we have to keep to our principles. We don't cede under pressure. We have to be direct. And we do need to take pride in our religious commitment. We are Orthodox. This is why we separate from the what we find Christianity in Europe. It's a dying religion. It's an actual dying religion.
Yeah.
The church is not being filled. In actual fact, the Muslims are buying out the churches to convert them into masjids. What do we want for the next generation? My kids, your kids if we were living in the West, do we want them to have that same state of religious commitment where it's just, suitable when we need it?
No, but on the other hand, isn't there that if they remain rooted in traditionalism, that they would never be able to be a part of European society and there would always be pariahs, outliers?
No.
Like, don't you feel like people growing up in Birmingham and Bradford, these sorts of places, you were never really fully English?
But that was the case when our parents migrated in the early 60s and 70s.
No, but wouldn't it help you become fully quote unquote English or European if you were to go down that path?
No, I don't. I think that would have the complete opposite effect, because then they would see you as people who forego their principles and cede them at a heartbeat. I think what it is we have integrated to the best of our ability without negating or relinquishing our Islamic tenets, beliefs, and our principles. What's the thing? I'll give you a personal story. I, being Pakistani, would naturally love cricket, right? I think it would be a bit crazy for a Pakistani not to like cricket.
Yeah.
So I played cricket for a club called Sutton Coldfield, very posh area within Birmingham, if not one of the top areas in Birmingham. And I played there for 10 years. And my beard obviously has grown out now, but at the time, it was really stubble because I've never shaved. It's one patch here, one patch here. They used to call me Ludacris, an American rapper. They used to call me that because my beard wasn't filled. Alvis, they called me. But what did I do? When they were curious. They said, why do you keep your beard like that? And they ask you questions out of curiosity. Now imagine if I was getting teased in school and I started shaving my beard and I started, trying to commit to the Western civilization. Do you reckon they'll have respect for me?
I suspect not.
No, because they will see you as a coconut. They will see you as a person that doesn't really hold his religion as something valuable and important and cherishes his religion. I think he has a complete opposite effect and he has a negative effect. But at the same time, we don't just shun ourselves into a corner and not integrate. So finding that balance is important and it's subjective.
So you think we've had a harder time than the rest of the Muslim community in particular because you think that the Desi scene is slightly more kowtowing towards the British or towards the Westerners? What about in relation to the rest of the Muslim diaspora? Do you feel like that the rest of the Muslim diaspora, especially the Arab and North African, the Arab-speaking diaspora, do they view the South Asian, Central Asian Muslim as somehow lesser?
Again,
because you complain about this.
No, I do. And Arab superiority, it does exist not just in the UK. You could see where, migrant workers work in
the Gulf, that's one argument. My point is, within the diaspora, you've complained about Dawah, and there's a very specific case you complained about where there was some audio,
some comments made,
some audio leaks, where some comments were made.
Unfortunately.
Do you think your reaction was proportionate? Wasn't it a fair assessment of what the Desi Islamic scene is like?
I be frank.
So what was the criticism? Can you recall?
So from memory, the criticism was that Desi culture is very shallow. And there's Huffaz, and being Huffaz is their only goal, but their mothers and their women don't wear proper hijab. And the second comment that really got me worked up was that he said, just look at Pakistan, right? Just look at Pakistan. So his issue wasn't just community-based in Dallas, Texas, where Pakistanis are. He even took it further and even started speaking about Pakistanis in general.
What does he say about Pakistanis?
Shallow culture, exactly the same thing. So he was using his experiences in Dallas, Texas, and then generalizing all Pakistanis to be the same. So what did I do? I said, of course, all cultures have issues. All cultures have certain aspects within their rituals that are against
idiosyncrasies.
Yeah, exactly. So what did I do? I've been Palestine, Walillah alhamd, 5 times. I live there. I've seen Palestinian culture. Some things are praiseworthy, some things are not. But do I generalize all Palestinians and say that, and let me open it up because it's only fair because many people don't know. They wear a lot of Western clothing along with their hijab. And you could see
in the Sham generally.
Exactly, but you don't generalize. This is the point.
No.
So if I
but don't you think that in what we would call a more private, intimate, conversation, that the audio got leaked as opposed to a public statement?
Yeah.
Shouldn't he get a little more?
So I would like to ask Omar Suleiman if he's watching, which he probably ain't.
I doubt it.
What I'd like to ask is, if that was such a concern as a da'i, as a sheikh, and as an imam, your haq to address your audience. If there's some vices that you're seeing, if you're seeing Desi women, these Desi women, if you see Muslim women not observing the hijab correctly, whether it's the headscarf or whether it's the jilbab or it's tight clothing or whatever it may be, do you not think that to address this for the benefit of your community?
I mean, don't you think that the da'i fears his community as much as the community fears the da'i?
I don't think so.
I mean, Duat are afraid of their audiences.
They like to cater to them. I don't say they're afraid of them.
By afraid, I mean in that they have to kowtow to them because the audience will cannibalize you.
But then that's not befitting for a da'i, in my opinion. You know, look at the ulama of the past. I'm not saying, you know, you have to compare yourself to them, but then they are role models, right? And you're a public speaker and you speak about these same imams and you lecture about their sacrifice and you lecture about their principles and how they behaved with their jama'ah or their community or their mujtama. I think it was proportionate to a certain extent. Yes, did I say some things that really I should have kept inside? Yes, but I think generally the video wasn't too harsh. But once again, are they exempt from accountability? No.
But don't you feel like you're letting the side down? You know what I mean?
I don't believe he's part of the side anyway.
That's really harsh.
No, I don't believe it. I believe he's again, this is my observation. It's open to interpretation and discussion. Living in the West, seeing how the American scene or the Americanized Islam is progressing, like we were talking about the last 20 years, has it centered on Islamic principles or has it gone further away trying to appease the American society? You tell me.
I suspect further away.
Further away. So Umar Suleiman being, you know, the poster boy, along with other public speakers, if we just turn our heads away and say, you know, mashallah, you know, he does great work. Islam is not a religion of convenience. Islam is a religion that has a principle.
But what about the good works? Can't we appreciate the good works that have come out of the American Dawah scene, about the American religious study?
Like what?
You know, a lot of good work.
Give me an example so then I could agree to disagree.
Inshallah, the audience can mention.
Okay, you can put it in the comments. What can I say? And I'm really, really thinking here. I'm really trying to, you know, dig deep into my, you know, long-term memory. What good has the American Dawah scene presented that we can adopt?
A lot of academic work has come out of it as well.
Like what, sorry?
Like a lot of the academic work has come out as well.
Like Yaqeen Institute, their articles, I could say, yeah, there's some good articles. Some articles I had to pick out myself with, you know, conversations with certain brothers within the Yaqeen, you know, board members. And I've picked out so much inconsistencies that it's just absolutely diabolical. But what I'm saying is that, yes, of course, there's khair and shar in every organization. But I don't find the American Dawah scene to be an example for Muslims in the West. In fact, it's the UK Dawah scene that is really holding the fort. I think the American Dawah scene is just a waste of time. Again, subjective.
So there's a class argument that is also made, by the way. I've heard this argument, is that a higher social class of immigrant went to the US.
That's right, I agree.
Which is why the US Dawah scene and the religious studies scene is more cosmopolitan, is more intellectually inclined. And the
I would say
is
liberal. I wouldn't say intellectually.
Let's just lay down the claim.
Go on, let's go.
And that the UK Dawah scene is slightly more
traditional
as well as primitive. It's more desi, it's more middle class, it's more working class. So the debates are of a lower tier and the discussion is of a lower tier. This is a case that people make.
The socio-economic position of the Muslims in America or North America specifically, it's definitely their lifestyle and the way they've, you know, integrated into society, and they earn more, they have a better lifestyle. That shouldn't really affect your religious positions, really. Okay, if we were from that socio-economic status, I don't think the UK Dawah will cater to, you know, the issues that the American there's recent issues that they don't even eat halal meat. Don't even eat halal meat.
Yeah, there's a
whole trend going on that they don't even eat halal. So,
but doesn't that come more from the Saudi sort of influence, the Arab influence?
No, not
as
eating.
Opposed to,
it wasn't even Ahl al-Kitab. It wasn't even the fact that there's the land is Ahl al-Kitab, so the biha, we're allowed to eat their meat. It's more to do with it just eating for the sake of eating. They don't eat halal meat. I don't usually have that discussion because in the UK we have that discussion as well. You know, it's the land of the, you know, Ahl al-Kitab. But I'm speaking about the whole paradigm that every single issue that we're finding of liberalism or extreme liberalism is always starting in America. Is that down to social economic statuses?
But it's also like I think someone put this really well on the podcast recently. Oh God, I'm completely forgetting. But they put it really well. I hope someone can mention it in the comments if they remember who it was. It was a couple of podcasts ago. They said that when you're in the belly of the beast, and they're the closest to the belly of the beast, right? Yeah. America. They're in the empire.
Yeah, of course.
They're part of the empire.
Yeah. And the dragon's nest,
The dragon's nest. And that exceptional feeling, that exceptionalism gives them their lens with which they look at Islam as well as unique. Yani American Islam is exceptional as well in that sense.
Of course.
So Like, wouldn't you cut them some slack for being so close to the belly of the beast?
Oh, we're in the belly of the beast that colonized the Islamic world, Britain.
I mean,
the mother of all evil to a certain extent.
200 years ago,
I know, but if
the UK doesn't even make steel now.
I know, but what I'm saying, UK, if they live in the dragon's nest or in the belly of the beast, what are we? Where are we living?
I mean, somewhere around the midriff.
Do you reckon? So do you reckon because we're on that side of the pond and they're on that side of the pond?
It's not the same as the US or
I know,
Canada.
but I'm saying
it's obviously not the same as living in Muslim lands, obviously.
Of course.
And it's not like living in somewhere in Africa or South America.
Right. That's right.
Western Europe and the North American scene is going to be unique, obviously.
Of course.
But by degrees of separation, the American scene will always be a bit more
liberal.
Yeah, because that's where it's coming from right now. Right now, the global trends are not being.
But they claim
influenced.
orthodoxy, though. That's the problem. When I speak, they say this is the Islamic position.
Wouldn't it
free mixing, for example?
Wouldn't it be better for them to at least claim orthodoxy in terms of providing lip service to that, as opposed to completely abandoning it? Because we've seen that as well.
But the proof's in the pudding, though, isn't it? It's like claiming one thing and then the fruits and the reality is something different. It's like swings and roundabouts. Like I could claim anything.
What about when it comes to issues like Philistine and, you see a lot of activism coming from the liberal quarters of the Muslim world as
It's
well?
leftist, isn't it?
Even as leftists, it wouldn't, like a practical experience, allow you to work with them as brothers and sisters?
No, definitely. And even just recently, I had discussions with those who I disagree with vehemently theologically. And for the cause of Palestine, you have to remember this is the blood of the mu'min is more than the Kaaba, more beloved than the Kaaba, or more sanctified than the Kaaba. At the same time, these issues are at the forefront. It's been going on for a year now, the Gaza conflict, and those who are split within certain manahij are coming together. There's no issue with that. I'm speaking about the fundamentals, how we should be approaching.
When debating the fundamentals.
When debating these, even the issues about Allah's names and attributes, right? I believe that again, it's important, but you've opened up.
I feel like you felt personally offended by Umar Suleiman. What was the lady's name? The woman? Yeah. You felt personally sort of offended by that a little.
I could say that there was a degree of
ghira, sort of like
ghira for the lack of the lack of you giving us the benefit of the doubt. You need to give your communities the benefit of the doubt. Are you judging 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 sisters whose children are becoming huffaz and painting the whole community as irreligious, culturally shallow? Is that irresponsible?
Even though maybe we set up all the butcher shops and maybe we did all the groundwork in the European scene and in the American scene.
We did, and I mentioned that as well. If you look at Europe, mainland Europe, you look at France, you look at Germany, you look at Netherlands, you look at all the mainland, and compare it to the UK.
Except maybe France.
France, because it's the biggest Muslim population, and North Africans. But I'm speaking about, look at what we've achieved due to the blessings of our fathers and grandfathers that came, with the little knowledge that they had, and even, let's add, the little religious commitment they had as well. They weren't ultra religious.
No.
But yet, look what they've done. In the little space of time, look how we've got a thriving community, how much emphasis they put on our upbringing. But if you want to compare it to the US, by sense, social, economic, has a major input in it. But I think that if you carry on that approach and that mentality, you're going to lead the next community to disaster.
There's a criticism that would come there is that look at the same argument would be made, but from the flip side, like look at the UK, it's a mess. Okay. And we made it a mess. This is an argument that you get from the Arab and North African Muslim world.
In what way did we make it a mess?
Yeah, I mean ghettoization, and we're part of the crime scene. We're the black market.
Of course.
The desis are all we're filling up the prison populations.
Of course.
We're a burden on the NHS. We're a burden on the welfare system. And so on and so forth. Yani, Pakistani or the Indian or the South Asian or just the Desi, let's call it, in the broad spectrum, we bring the Bengali brothers.
Because we're the majority in that
Afghani brothers as well. We are the reason for the big mess in the Western European scene. This is what they argue. This is what they implicitly believe. You know what it is.
I know what you're saying. And I'm not shying away and saying that we do have a huge issue with crime, drugs, every
welfare
vice.
Theft
of course, welfare theft and everything else. But that doesn't necessitate that because we have these vices. It's not a perfect society. We're not, perfect role model citizens. We're going to have bad apples. We're going to have bad eggs. But let's look at the positives in a 40, 50, 60-year span, how much we've progressed. Remember, when our fathers came, racism was at its height. Meaning they were
They took the brunt.
the National Front and the skinheads gave our grandfathers and fathers a difficult time. Not just us, even the Afro-Caribbeans that came from it was an issue.
The wind shear generation? What do you call it?
Windmill. But
Not
I'm saying-
windmill. What do they call it? The wind
West Indies.
Wind rush. The wind rush.
Sorry, the boat that came.
Yeah.
So whilst that is true that there is an issue with how Asians or Desis are not really contributing to the society, that shouldn't be like one brush paint everything in that light.
For the first time in your defense as well, I think proportionally in terms of the numbers we have, having a few bad apples is not that much of a big deal.
How much are we? We're about 2-3 million
in the UK.
In the UK,
I don't know.
Yeah, so I think we're about 4% of the population. That's including reverts and whatnot.
Wow.
But I think Desis, if you include the Indians, Pakistanis, Bengalis, and Pathan brothers, we're probably about 5-6% or something like that. Let's be frank, that's nothing. 60 million is 66 million the population of the UK. We've done, and I think we should give ourselves a pat on the back. We have done incredibly well, whilst not overlooking the issues and the crimes and the welfare system being abused and whatnot. Everything has this, it has to be proportional, like you said.
The flip side of this also is the post 9/11 was one era, right?
Yeah.
Where everybody was being persecuted, and the Imams and the Masajid and the ISOCs and the ICNAs
Prevent and all of them.
There was FBI was everywhere, CIA, MI5, everyone was on everyone's case, right? But then you also have a post-ISIS era, right? This is in that era, we became insular, we became more about protecting and preserving the community. And then in this post-ISIS era, I feel like what you're calling the modernist Imams, they really came out in full strength.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think that is also an attempt to preserve the deen and preserve the population that believes in the deen? It's an attempt to protect them from things like Daesh and intelligence agencies and being cracked down on and being arrested and all those sorts of things. It's a genuine fear response.
But it wasn't just the modernists, it was traditional Orthodox Muslims that were countering the Daesh narrative. It wasn't just like we had all these liberals come forward. We were at the forefront. I've made videos, again, I'm not speaking about 2014 post because I didn't have a channel then.
Right.
But I remember when,
on the streets, in the Dawah scene, you were on it.
From post 2018-19, and I will talk about that, about the Najdi Dawah and its issues and Daesh and whatnot. Again, that's going to open up a floodgate. But when I speak about 2014 post, when Daesh obviously sprung and they were obviously, the indiscriminate attacks in, Europe and whatnot, I don't think that the modernists put themselves, put their neck on the line and said, we're going to now defend Islam. Because this is Islam anyway. لا تقتل الشيخ الكبير والطفل الصغير والامرأة. You're not allowed to kill elderly men, women, and children. This is Islam. لا تقتل الأبرياء. You don't kill the innocent. And that was a reaction, of course, where the Daeshis claim that you kill our civilians, we kill yours, but that's not an Islamic principle.
No.
That we have our rules of engagement and jihad and what we're allowed to do. It's clear. So, the balance of the modernist Imam didn't really do much impact.
It's an unfair clumping of the Salafi Dawah scene and the general traditional scene together, because that's the general dichotomy that happened. There was modernists versus the traditionalists / Salafists. That became the dichotomy. And you think that distinction needs to be made, that the traditional ulama and du'at were separate and the Salafi Dawah scene was separate, even though there is intermingling. And you said there is khair in the Salafi Dawah scene. Where is the shar in the Salafi Dawah scene? Can we start with that?
Okay. Does
it go all the way back to the Najdi Dawah?
That's the source. That's the root. When you say Salafism...
People have argued, by the way. This is an argument that people who are critical of the Najdi Dawah and the Salafi Dawah say that ISIS and Daesh are kittens compared to the Najdi Dawah and the stuff that they wanted to achieve. Is that a fair characterization?
Which is what again, sorry?
That the Daeshis are kittens compared to the Najdi Dawah in terms of what they wanted to... They were much more harsh, much more violent, and...
That's fact. That's not like you're using an analogy to make Daesh less evil. The proofs in the pudding, like I keep saying, just open the books of TARIQ. Look what they did from 1157. And people, again, I just want to add as a disclaimer, right, for the brothers and sisters watching. When I say the Najdi Dawah, I'm talking about the original Najdi Dawah. Today's Najdi Dawah is a diluted, mind my French, a bastard version.
Bastardized version.
Again, bastardized version, diluted, watered down. When you go back and going into the history of the Najdi Dawah, you would see written in black and white by eyewitnesses. I'm talking about Ibn Ghannam, Ibn Bishr, and those who were there, who were documenting this pen to paper at that particular time. And then you fast forward and you look at the atrocities committed by Dawa'ish in Syria and Iraq. What's the difference? Nothing. And remember, they had swords, they didn't have obviously the modern technology.
Yeah.
So the massacres naturally that Daesh committed were huge because of the arsenal that they had. They were slaughtering thousands and hundreds in tribes and villages across Al-Yamama and Al-Arid, which is Central Arabia. So yes, they are kittens compared to the original Najdi Dawah. The Salafi Dawah were very clever, and I'll tell you what happened. The awakening and the Sahwa after the Gulf War changed the dynamics completely. And this is what Salafis don't accept. That even Ali Sheikh, Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, we're talking about King Faisal's time, they were still hardcore. They were very hardcore. But when the Gulf War happened, then you had like the Madakhila, Rabi al-Madkhali writing books about Ta'awan ma'al American, and aiding the Americans, because that's what they did essentially.
And then the split happened.
And then the split happened. Then obviously the whole Dawah scene, or the whole Salafi Najdi Dawah split, and it's never been
the same.
So yes, going back to the original question, they are kittens, and that's not us trying to make it look bad.
Do you think the extreme hardcore stuff went with the state narrative or went with the anti-state narrative?
With against the anti-state narrative,
that would become Al-Qaeda and Daesh, and then eventually. All right. Yeah. And then, do you think that same intensity is in the state narrative, in the Madkhali narrative, and that sort of pro in your friend Shamsi's narrative?
Yeah.
Is that same extremism still there?
That's where the split happened, didn't it? One side was pro state rulers, bootlickers, and then you had the others who were like the spawn of the Najdi Dawah, the spawns, the offspring. And then it weren't compatible because they were the original followers, like to the T, to the letter. These Al-Qaeda, Dawa'ish and all them, the Ikhwan in the 1920s, when Abdul Aziz used these militias who were not 100, 200 years after the original Najdi Dawah, they founded the state.
Would you compare Ikhwan and stuff to this as well?
Ikhwan were the Ikhwan of the 1920s or the Ikhwan al-Muslimin?
The Ikhwan of the 1920s.
Yeah, exactly. What you see of Dawa'ish is no different to the Ikhwan. But then what you find from the Ikhwan prior, because the third Saudi state, which is now what we see today, it was its extension after the second Saudi state, but that was a civil war. So they didn't really go out and commit massacres. It was just sort of sovereignty. They wanted that state. And then the Saud tribe lost the territory to the Rashidiyya, the Rashid family. And then they got exiled to Kuwait. So Abdul Aziz, meaning the founding father of the third Saudi state, started his, not khuruj, but started his revolution after obviously gaining some support from the Ikhwan, who were, not the kittens, but we could say the, probably young child of the Najdi Dawah. You could say orphaned, if you want to call them that. Yeah, it was crazy. I've read so much and that's where the issue is with the Salafi Dawah. It's just trying to accept it. They can't. Because in the 90s, you have to remember the internet we were talking about, and they glamorized Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. They just put him on a pedestal, which he doesn't deserve, honestly. But as I said,
were you ever mystified and then eventually demystified by Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab? Did you pick up on the glamour and thought maybe, wow?
Not really, no.
Never?
No, because my early education when I was growing up was in the Dar al-Ulooms, studying in the madrasas amongst the Dar al-Nizami, Deoband sort of Hanafi tradition. And then eventually I didn't really read much of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab in my early teens because that was the trajectory was different. But then when I started studying, and studying with graduates from Medina, and then they asked me to read, because Tawheed, they always refer to Kitab al-Tawheed, Kashf al-Shubahat, Qawaid al-Arba'a, Usul al-Thalatha, Fadl al-Islam. So we went through those books, which pen to paper, textually, there's no issue with that. What happens is you need to know the context. You need to know the methodology of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. So I'll give you an example, just so you understand. So Nawaqid al-Islam is a book of the nullifiers, right?
Yes.
And there's 10 nullifiers in that book. And one of the nullifiers, I think, is number 3, which is Man lam yukaffir al-kafir or shakka fi kufrihim or sahha madhabahum kufr ijma'an.
Yes.
That whoever doesn't make takfir of the kafir or authenticates their views, madhab, or sahha or madhabahum, and authenticates their view, and it's kufr ijma'an. Do you know when Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab wrote this, you know who he was referring to? They would argue, this is where I was saying where they've diluted it. They would say, no, this means the Asl Yahud and Nasara. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them kuffar, right?
Yes.
Who was he referring to? He was referring to Arabian tribes amongst Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab who did not make takfir of the Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
That's what happened. Now, what resulted in that was huge bloodshed.
Also, that fatwa gives the cascade effect of, he who doubts the kufr is a kafir and
Chain takfir.
It's a cascade effect of takfir.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's what they call takfir tasalsul.
Yeah.
Now, I'm Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab and I've got Muhammad bin Saud. And there's a tribe called Kharj, or there's a place called Kharj in Central Arabia. And they apparently worship trees and stones. So now you're in a different tribe, just say in Huraymila, you're a different area called Huraymila, and I send you a letter and I say, do you know Al-Kharj, they're kuffar? And you say, I don't know about that. You're kafir because you don't make...
Yeah.
And then your blood's legal and their blood's legal and everyone's blood was legal. This is what they kept hidden. And they glamorized it that one. When I came out and said, oh man, there's some foul play here, there's some issues.
Have you received pushback by the Salafi brothers?
Yeah, I'm not.
Are they angry at you?
What they said wasn't wise of you, Haji, because then you'll stop people reading his books. I said, let's be frank, the books are decent. It's not to say that people are going to lose their iman if they don't read those books. The truth has to be said. If you don't want to believe it, you want to cover your ears and pretend that the videos I've recorded doesn't exist, that's your issue. But it does give the impression that it's fanaticism, isn't it?
No, but don't you think even I'm not an advocate of not reading any particular books because they're dangerous or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that a younger person on the Salafi manhaj, growing up with that sort of mindset, the kind of enmity they have towards fellow Muslims, we see it.
That's right.
From here. Don't you think that's a bit of a problem and needs to be addressed?
And that's where this, to understand the roots of the Salafi Dawa and
like the
characteristics.
The casual way, like Shamsi, I watch Shamsi and you guys debate him about the casual way with which he issues takfir and
tabdi' as well.
Tabdi', so and so is a mubtadi', such and such is a ikhwan fariq. And he says ikhwan al-Muslimin, they're all this and Jamaat Islami and
everyone,
Jamaat Tabligh and so on. This sort of attitude, it's self-defeating. Obviously, it doesn't last. ISIS didn't.
You know what happens? They burn themselves out. And this is what I've seen, not just heard. I've seen it. You'll find someone on, like when you're in your car and you got a sports car, you put it, 0 to 60, and the revs go. This is them. They go so fast. It's not sustainable, akhi.
Salafi burnout is a famous.
It's very
a real
true.
famous phenomenon.
Of course.
A lot of them now call themselves Hanbali or Maliki or Shafi. Never Hanafi.
Neo-Hanbalis, I call them.
Never Hanafi.
No. We're Ahlul Ra'i. We're the people of opinion. But the Neo-Salafi Dawa now, and I say this Neo-Salafi or Neo-Hanbali, it's a reaction
to the burnout. To the burnout.
So they've gone now to, and again, now we're venturing into creed. They've become like Ash'aris, but they're in the name of Hanbalism. So they go, we are Hanbalis, but we are against Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. So what they're trying to do is add legitimacy that Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab wasn't a Hanbali, even though I believe he was a Hanbali, but he wasn't a mujtahid. Like the way they call him Shaykhul Islam, that's ridiculous. Like his books are this big. Like, come on. No, but it's true though. His books were minute. They were pamphlets. It
was the impact that they were referring to.
It was his connection to the state that made him so popular. Take away his affiliation to Muhammad bin Saud. Just take that away. His books would be hardly read. It's the same thing with Barbahari, for example. Like, Sharh al-Sunnah of Barbahari. They've elevated his works because it coincides with their attitude, your harshness, Ahl al-Bid'ah. And it's sort of, it transpires or it manifests that this is their harshness because of their connection to the Salafi Dawa.
If as a reaction to that, the Neo-Salafi, Neo-Hanbali Dawa has come up, wouldn't that also allow room for our brothers that we mentioned earlier, the Modernist Dawa? Because they've also come as a reaction to this stuff. A little bit, they have.
Yeah.
So on two ends, you have two strains forking out. One is the more modernist with Yasir Qadi, or with people like Omar Suleiman.
We could call them liberals because that's what they are. I know what you do.
I think they would take umbrage to that.
I know, but let's look at it frankly, right? When I did a pre-mixing series, I don't know whether you watched that.
Pre-mixing?
Yeah, it's a whole
very
series.
Very common in America, by the way. Yeah,
and
not in the UK, by the way.
No, but it's happening. Everything happens in America first,
and then
it comes across the pond, and then we deal with it.
Right.
What happened when I say liberal modernist is because what they tend to do is they divorce traditionalism to the extent now is that we now have a certain Islam. This is orthodox according to our opinion, but really it's connected to liberalism, liberalistic principles. They might have reservations to that.
Is it a final defense of them? Isn't that also a practical consequence that in the UK we live in ghettos or communities or whatever you want to call them? We have our in Bradford, in Birmingham, in Slough, in these areas, in Watford. Right. We have
ghettos.
Our own. That's what they're called. They're either in ghettos, or if we have upper class individuals, they're in boroughs where it's mostly Muslims.
Right.
Even you have places where the houses are physically connected to the masjid, in that the speaker system goes throughout the homes. That the women at home are listening to the khutbah and the men are listening to it in the masjid. We have these kinds of setups. You've seen them. I've had the honor and privilege to see them while enjoying a cheeky fish and chips.
Nice.
All right. So that's not the case in America.
Of course.
You have Muslim communities over there, some over here, in a pocket here. They're living in white neighborhoods, classically white.
That's
They're living in
suburbs,
upper class neighborhoods in suburbs. So given that socioeconomic consideration, what I asked you earlier as well, isn't it a practical reality where they have to allow things like free mixing? Because where are they going to get married? I'm asking this very seriously, by the way.
Okay, no, I understand your question.
That sort of social gathering in the masjid, in the Muslim society, in the ISOC, that early sort of courtship, flirtatious period is where they get marriages. It's not a joke, I'm very serious.
No, I understand.
They don't have the same sort of get your cousin back from Jailam, you got to marry your cousin, your propose.
You've been ordered.
You've been ordered to marry your aunt's son from Mirpur or whatever. They don't have those social tribal ties. They don't have the same connections with their home countries because a lot of them are from Palestine or from Syria, from places where they can't really go back to anymore.
That's right.
So doesn't that create a bit of a, I wouldn't say justification, but a wiggle room for the American Muslim?
How would I see it through my lens? Is that you have a community in America, right? And we mentioned Dallas because we mentioned those.
And we'll finish on this. We go back to the Salafi Dawa.
No, it's good. It's a good question. Yeah. And whilst you say there's a bit of wiggle room, for them having a certain approach, what we're finding is for these laymen who don't have that community to fall back to, I can give them an excuse. I can't give excuse to callers or du'at or ulama to abuse the text and to, extract this to justify secular liberal norms and pass it off as Islam.
For example, the free mixing. How do they do that?
So I'll give you an example, right? And this is a recent video that I saw. And I've done a whole series, so whoever's interested, go on the Bro Haji.
Check out Bro Haji. It's going to be in the thing.
Yeah, and it's free mixing. The playlist is free mixing. This goes into it from a traditional Islamic perspective. Is that in the West or in the US, what I'm finding is that, women and men, and they've got in the musalla area, not just in any area, in the musalla area, where, and I don't want to talk about the text because then it gets too technical. You've got seats here, no barrier in the musalla area, and there's an Islamic talk being given. In the musalla, I'm emphasizing that point.
It's not front and back, it's left and right.
You could walk past and you could just stare into someone's eyes. Now, when you say about how would they meet?
Deeply and fall in love.
No, of course I could fall in love like this. But what I would argue is when you say how do you meet each other? Islam, we have cultural, baggage.
I'm glad that our wives don't watch any of the garbage that we produce.
No, my wife doesn't.
My wife doesn't either. We can talk about women. Alhamdulillah.
I'll even block her somehow, VPN or something. But what it is, Habib, is that when we say Islam, right, we talk about traditional Islam. The fiqh that talks about you could even look at a woman's face without any niqab. Even the scholars have said arms. Some have gone to the extreme and said you could even see them naked as long as, because of defects and whatnot. I'm saying there's wiggle room for in the Islamic jurisprudence.
But that's in the case when you're trying to pursue a marriage.
You have to be serious. You have to be committed.
What we would call in Desi language, a rishta process has started.
That's right.
Courtship.
You get it? It started where the families are involved. Not just like I see a girl say, I want to see your hair. It's the formal process. Yeah. So that's not exclusive to, because we're more progressive and more liberal, how we're going to meet each other. Islam encourages this, that you should see each other. Even like, for example, when I got married, I went to Morocco, and when I wanted to get to know, obviously I got to know her through a mutual, but then when I went to get to know when I went to Morocco, her brother was right there and I was openly talking to her.
But in the musalla as well, in the free mixing, the family is all there.
No, you Jews. And now that's where now we look at the hadith that I'll present one, that the Prophet ﷺ finished the prayer. He finished the prayer. I think Tariq bin Shihab narrated this. And the Prophet ﷺ waited. So he's finished the salah. He's sitting there waiting. The women got up because the Masjid Nabawi was very small. And women had one access to the, Ibn Umar narrated that they had a door that they had access to, and never did the men enter into that door. So when the Prophet ﷺ finished the prayer, the women left. Tariq bin Shihab, radhiyallahu anhu, who's narrating this, saying the reason why is that the Prophet ﷺ let the women go so there's no mixing. Yes. And remember, in the roads, in the shawara, you don't have any power or authority to control free mixing, right? Another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ went outside after performing a prayer and he's seen men and women, where? On the road. Think about it now. Look at the setting. On the road. Can you control what's on the road? The Prophet ﷺ said to the women, go to the far ends, to the wall, to the point that when they were walking, their jilbabs were touching the walls.
Scraping the walls,
and you're having these conversations in the masalla area. And forget the ahnaf,
but isn't that the ideal as opposed to the basic hukum?
So you mean like this is the awla, preferred way, but not the way.
Isn't that the debate that they present?
No, because what does it say? Mudhinatul fitna. It's a source of fitna.
Without a doubt.
Do you see? And every ruling, and this is what the ulama have said, and you can watch the video, that Imam Ghazali said this, by the way, and people think Imam Ghazali is sitting there cross-legged, and we had this perception with Ghazali. Imam Ghazali's Ihya mentions this with such extreme language, and he calls it munkarat al-masajid. Munkarat al-masajid. And it mentions that women shouldn't even go to the majalith al-dhikr. Don't even go to the majalith al-dhikr because of fitna. Now imagine, teleport Imam Ghazali in our time now. What would this we're talking about 6th century Hijri, which was conservative under the Khilafah, where the state was imposing Islam or influencing Islam. What would he have? What would his fatwa have been if he would have seen the likes of the Americanized Islam? We have to call a spade for spade. We know that we can't control everything, but we have to try our best, right? Okay, I understand in university, when you give lectures in university, you got no control over that.
Or in a workplace.
In a workplace, you got no control. There's rukhsas. We've got no control. But where we have control in an Islamic environment and settings, don't you think the bare minimum should be that we should conform to Islamic principles, guidelines and whatnot?
Within the masajid.
Within the masajid. Yeah. Okay? Or even in a hall, for example. I was offered to talk in a setting, I think it was to do with certain historical, I think it was Salah ad-Din. And the brother said, Haji, you know what? The hall's not that big, so we're going to invite sisters, but it's not going to have a barrier. I said, I'm not coming. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you a funny story. You're going to laugh. I did a talk in a masjid about Salah ad-Din, another one in Crawley. And what it was, I was speaking like this. So it was a big masjid, so the sisters were over there. And those barriers that you have, that cover them. But what happens is you open it up and then it's like a door, and you just cover the sisters so they can't be mixing with the men. So what happened was sometimes sisters were walking in and out, and one forgot to shut the door. And literally, as I'm talking now, so I'm looking at the camera there. Your eyes, you have your emotions and you look around. Okay, the door was open, and I was looking, because it affected me, because my concentration now was okay. You know what? I'm not saying I'm innocent, because shaitan yajri min al-insan, through his blood. Yeah. So I'm saying the prevention needs to be there. One cannot say, we live in higher, suburbs and we have a social economic advantage over you. That means we can kind of, bend the rules a bit. No, I'm sorry. Islam doesn't work like that. Okay, you've got maslaha, mafsada, the harms and the benefits. Even if you use that argument, the lesser of the two evils, it still doesn't justify it. It doesn't.
Coming back to
Dawah. Let's get back into it.
I think we've settled it. If you are an American Muslim watching this, you have to leave.
Yeah.
You have to leave America.
I demand, no, leave America. Come to Birmingham if you want. But demand that more restrictions and Islamic guidelines and principles to the best of their ability. Because sometimes you can't.
Followed in the masajid, in the
masajid, exactly.
Where we organize our events.
Sometimes you might have to, I'm not saying, but don't become so relaxed that is the norm. Do you see? Sometimes exceptions will happen. But don't feel comfortable with that. Voice it to your committee. Say, look, we have to have it segregated. And the video's there if you want to watch it. It's got abundance of, and not just from one madhab, like the Hanafi madhab, from the madahib. Like this is there's consensus on this, and anyone who tells you otherwise, it's probably had some non-halal meat in America.
All right, coming back to the Salafi Dawah.
Yeah, let's get back to that.
So they've had their splits. They've learned from their mistakes.
Yeah.
And then moved on. They're like the Neo-Hanbali sort of scene.
Yeah, yeah.
And you alluded to this, how they still depend on in their creed, because they're not Athri anymore. Their
They're Hanbali,
but they're leaning on a lot of Western canon for
Orientalists,
philosophy, for philosophy, for theology, for their methodology.
Yeah.
Do you think, and that has borne some good fruits as well? It's not like it's not completely without merit.
Of course.
But do you think that it would be ideal for us to return to traditional kalam sort of theology, and because the Athari creed is not effective at answering a lot of questions for the more modern-minded, material science studying.
The atheists, the liberals, and whatnot. Look, and
because they've created this ijaza for arguing with them, and I think they quote Ibn Taymiyyah that arguing with them, you can use mantak and all these things.
And kalam, yeah.
And kalam, yeah.
The kalam, there's two types of kalam. One is madmuma, and one is mahmuda. That can be debated about the mahmuda, but kalam in the name and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that's where it's centered from, right? Yeah. When the early Abbasid period, Bayt al-Hikmah, and they translated the Aristotle works, and then the Mu'tazila, the rationalists came in and they started sort of rejecting the names and attributes. That's where the issue was. So when the Salaf critiqued ilm al-kalam, it was based on the fact that they were rejecting the sifat and the asma of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They said Allah doesn't have rahmah, Allah doesn't, have a mercy, and whatever it may be. In the discourse of tackling a new wave of liberalism and atheism, mantiq that doesn't go against the Quran and the Sunnah is praiseworthy for me. I never said that. And that's that's a more intolerant, box-headed, rigid Salafi view. I don't hold that view.
And you've been involved more with the Dawah towards non-Muslims or within the Muslim community?
No, I'm more intra-Islam.
Intra-Islam,
right. I think we've got brothers such as Brother Zabur, Hijab. Yeah. You have, what's his name, Hamza Dorsi. So I get along with very well. And I've never ever, tried to cross paths.
No.
Yeah, like now recently I'm starting to learn Hebrew. So I've started learning Hebrew now. So eventually, I'm very, very lay when it comes to, Christian Muslim polemics. John 3:13, and Ahmed Didat, Allah yarhamu, set the path for us, Dr. Zakir Naik, and now we've got brothers like Hijab and my brother, and Hamza and Hashim Mansoor.
We have the convert Paul from Blogging Theology.
Yes, Blogging Theology. And then we even got the brothers from EF Dawah. I think that door doesn't need to be opened by anyone else now. No one needs to reinvent the wheel.
With that.
So I'm content that Muslim Christian polemics is taken care of. When it comes to interest, Sunni, as I said before, there's too much egos. Everyone wants to be Jack the Lad. Everyone wants to create some sort of name for themselves. It's a very toxic scene, the Dawah scene generally, and I do feel
it's a toxic scene. As an outside viewer, by the way, for us, that's the ideal. We look at the brothers and sisters in the Dawah scene and
toxic.
What do you across the board?
Generally across the board, yeah.
In what sense? Do you think?
I'll give you an example. So for me, and I've been in the Dawah scene now for 6-7 years, and I get along with practically everyone. Apart from the usual
the ones you don't.
The usual suspects,
right.
And I never, when I give da'wah privately. Al-majalis bil amana, private gatherings. You keep it in that gathering. You don't venture it outside. When I say there's a issue of egos clashing, it's now the algorithm decides. The algorithm is what people are chasing, and that's what I see. And again, I'm not a big fan of reaction videos. I'm, as you know, more of an academic based channel. It won't get the hits. It won't get the clicks as someone sitting and speaking about, P. Diddy, for example. Do you see what I'm saying? Then they can add an Islamic flavor, and that people will watch that because it's got someone of notoriety and it's adding Islamic.
I understand what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying? So when I say toxic, is now views, likes.
The algorithm
is the deciding factor now. Whereas with me, I've done a lot of research on the Athari Creed series. It's very, academic, talking about the names and attributes of Allah, going to the books of the Salaf, and it'll hardly get any views. But if I now were to talk about a personality, for a fact,
Umar
Sulaiman, it'll get clicks upon clicks.
Everyone
will watch it. So me personally, I would never allow myself to be bogged down in following the views and the algorithms.
Is it just the algorithm that's making the Dawah?
But then it's the monetization as well.
The money is ruling the market?
Money, of course. Algorithms and views dictate
equal money. Yeah.
Equal money.
Because then you sell advertisements as well.
Exactly. And then businesses will contact you. So is it surprising if I say some have used their platform to monetize a religion? It's not unfair to say so.
But don't you think it's a necessity in the modern age to be able to finance any operation to generate certain amounts?
I don't. In the modern sense, I think it's more easier to work a 9-5, work 5 days a week, and also I do it.
Yeah.
You know, okay, maybe someone who's working with Islamic organizations, they're the exception to the rule because they got an Islamic organization, so they can get paid, right? That's their service. They're writing books and articles. I don't have an issue with that. But then when it comes to like, and again, the charity sector, then you got Hajj and Umrah, and then you got sponsors, and then all of a sudden, you know, pay for my Patreon. Oh, not to say I haven't done it, because for example, me personally, I finance everything myself. I've been doing it 6 years. Some brothers have contacted me and said, Haji, why don't you set up a Patreon? We want to help you. But I wouldn't be, if someone approached me, I don't feel comfortable. I work a 9-5, I'm more happy that way. And the early Imams used to do that as well. They never mixed the deen and money. Imam Abu Hanifa was a trader, right. Sufyan al-Thawri, Sufyan al-Uyayna, they had strong words about, you know, even wouldn't even take positions of Chief Justice, like Al-Ma'mun and Ja'far bin Mansur, when they asked him, Abu Hanifa, we want you to be a Chief Qadi. He goes, no, I don't want to be. Because he didn't want to mix money and being cozy with the rulers and that. And Ghazali wrote a book.
So would you say the new scene is that instead of getting cozy with people who are getting cozy with the rulers, the modernist types, you've done away with them anyways?
Yeah, I've done away with them, yeah.
But in the conservative, in the traditionalists, rooted in the Islamic scene as well, you think the new market is Hajj and Umrah packages, and travel packages, charities.
Charity is the worst.
And these sorts of things.
Hajj and Umrah has been abused for decades in the UK, to the point that the UK have actually created a division to tackle Hajj and Umrah fraud.
The UK state?
The UK government. Wow. They've got a division. So if it happened in obscurity, you know, you have a fraudulent Hajj and Umrah. One here, maybe 5 here, maybe 10 there. We're talking on a massive scale. So to dedicate and to create, to innovate a special task force or a division to tackle Hajj and Umrah fraud, that's shameful, isn't it? For Muslims, Hajj and Umrah, one of the pillars of our faith. That if you don't complete it while having the funds,
we know what happens.
Yeah. Some have said it's kufr.
You die as a Jew or a Muslim.
There's no difference between a Jew and a Christian. Or there's a hadith of zakat. If the person doesn't do it, your wealth turns into a snake with like 2 darts and says, I'm your wealth, I'm your wealth. Or kama qala alayhi salatu wasalam. These 2 principles in the West, because we live, and I say this without any fear, because we live in a capitalistic society,
they become materialistic endeavors.
Materialistic in nature. And then what happens is, we're giving da'wah, and Islam is being used while at the same time you're getting paid substantial amount, especially with the charity sector.
The zakat and the Hajj and Umrah are the exploiting sector.
Abused. And now Gaza is happening. I took it upon myself.
You have mentioned
it. Yes. And it's disgusting to say the least. Disgusting.
You've recommended that people should donate to the
UNWRA.
And they just yesterday, before we started recording this, I think yesterday or the day before, they have been forbidden on operating inside Gaza as well.
Like my phone's over there because I didn't want to get disturbed. I've got access to working in operations. I use Power BI a lot. And I've got access to UN data because there's 6 crossings. Not many people know this. In Gaza, there's 6 crossings, not just Rafah. There's 6. And it's very difficult to get aid in. Very difficult. Even at the time, I think it was in when it started the Rafah campaign. I think that was in May May or June. They were saying, aid is going to be limited. What did the charities do? Hot meals. Now hold on. Common sense, and you're a very smart individual, brother Amanullah.
Yeah.
If there's a blockade,
you heard him.
Yeah, I heard it. I'm not lying. He didn't pay me. If there's a blockade, common sense. There's a blockade. Israelis are telling you just read the news, right? That they've banned
the UN,
where Power BI data is telling me how much are going in, what is going in, how much quantity, so much data that I've got access to. And you're requesting donations and you're showing me videos of, on there, and they're getting made. And there's a blockade. What's going to happen eventually? It's going to run out, isn't it? Is that too much? Am I overthinking?
No.
And Gaza is 20/5. Certain places you can't get to, right? So you got the north of Gaza, which is extremely besieged. Beit Hanun, Beit Liha, Jabalia, Shaja'iyya, and all of these areas. Then you carry on central, Deir Bala, then you carry on Khan Yunis, then you carry on Rafah, Gaza City and whatnot. There's no aid going in for ages. So how are you maintaining cooking hot meals? How are you maintaining that flow of food? Millions, I'm talking hundreds of millions since the start of the war until now has been raised. And I spoke to you about gift aid, didn't I? That for every £100, 25.
Yeah, the UK government.
The UK government give you.
For every £100.
This is the major incentive. How much charity organizations are opening? Because everyone knows. What are they doing? Let's be frank, Brother Aman. What are they doing? They're just requesting donations. What work are they doing? They got contacts on the ground. What are they doing? But they monetizing the charities. And there's a verse in the Quran which they abuse in Surah Al-Ma'idah that zakat has 8 categories. And one of them are the amilun.
Yeah.
Or the amilin alayha. Right?
The ones who carry it out.
Who collect. And what they'll say is, oh, we're amilun. No, you're not. According to the Islamic basic terminology or the ta'rif of al-amil is man nasab al-imam, the one that the imam appoints.
But given that the vacuum of the state exists, that we don't
Yeah.
have a centralized Islamic state to refer back to with regards to our zakat.
Yeah, amilun.
And then the amilun then would be, in an ad hoc sense, would be private organizations, NGOs. Wouldn't that allow for some room?
Because zakat has conditions, right? What they call those who are mustahiqeen.
So then would people have to, in an ideal world,
Then you just create a separate fund for.
they would have to do it separately, individually?
Yes, of course. The rules don't change. Remember, this is a pillar of our faith. Zakat is what? Ibadah. You don't bend it as you will.
So then what does it look like? That the Birmingham community gets together and makes a zakat fund on their
What
own?
I say is that there needs to be a unified charity, a body, an actual body.
Transnational
Yeah. So
Muslim.
for each country, there needs to be a body. We're talking about uniting the ummah, but charities can't unite. Why? Because there's a big pocket of pool of money. Everyone's eating, exploiting these campaigns. Everyone. And I'm not saying there's a trend with the UK saying 100% donation policy. Yes, you'll probably find a charity or two who have big businesses that fund them or pay for their salaries or their operations,
Right.
of course. But everyone's 100%, most of them are 100% donation policy. What they don't tell you is, and I believe this wholeheartedly, I believe that when they say 100% donation policy, they just mean the zakat. You know the sadaqah and the lillah? Yes, they got operation cost. But when you're doing it in the name of charity, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's in the name of charity. So overall, this concept of charity is for who? For lillah. Like I said, it's ibadah. You're not going to find any charity that's going to be so transparent. And that's what I've noticed in the Gaza conflict. They're not transparent.
So how do people express their solidarity with the people in Gaza? How do they help them?
So how are they going to help? And as I said before, there's ways of getting around, financial support, transaction and whatnot, right? And why I find that with the financial transactions, it's difficult. Even there's a report that said that cash transactions are difficult due to the lack of operations in Gaza. So what happens is, like, naturally someone will have a bit of wealth, not in the bank. And then I've got evidence that people from the UK are charging merchant fees. They're taking percentages for themselves. I've got actual evidence. So when I'm collecting, right? So you could transfer to Gaza. There's different means that you could transfer to Gaza in many different ways. And that's a different discussion. You can do it.
Direct money.
Yeah, direct money. So you can't just basically transfer hundreds of thousands because that's ridiculous. You can't.
But small amounts.
But small amounts you can. And I know
to maintain families.
Yeah, exactly. Just little amounts. That's why they give them money. But because there's so much issues getting aid in, inflation's too high.
Obviously.
So Pampers and I think one, because I follow these Al Jazeera journalists, I've actually spoken to a few as well. Anas al-Sharif, and I spoke to a few others. They said that like Snickers, it's like about $15.
Sneakers isn't
Snickers. The chocolate
bar. Yeah.
$15, $10, $15. So we're talking about 100, 200, 300% inflation. So what I always say to the small amounts, when we were talking about the merchant fee. So these brothers are collecting money, transferring it, and saying to the merchant takes his cut, right? The merchant takes his cut, and they also taking a cut as well.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've got evidence of that. So in time, I'm going to release that as well. So when I hear, and this is what I know, what I've got evidence for. Imagine how many others are doing it, which I don't have the evidence for.
How worse it might be in actuality.
Thank you. And how long they've been doing this as well. And then when you look at the charities as well, we're talking 10, 20, 30.
Then again, we come back to it that maybe financially it's not going to be possible.
Charity is not the solution, Habibi. I think with European NGOs, what they're doing is they know that people are naturally, upset, and they're playing on the heartstrings. It's emotional blackmail. I do believe that. Look, I'm not saying don't raise money, and I'm not saying don't do your bit, but don't oversell your worth. Like, don't act as if, like, now you just mentioned about the UNWRA being blocked. So how are you getting aid in then? How? You're still going to collect the money, right? What they're going to say? Yeah, when it opens up. But then what did I say earlier? The 25% gift aid. It's healthy, isn't it? So UNWRA, because I know they've got access. So I say to everyone, donate to them. And I'll give you another opinion of mine. If there weren't no NGOs from the UK, just say there was no Islamic charities in the UK, NGOs, there'll still be food getting into Gaza. We're just a needle in the haystack. But with the way we market,
Right.
because we're from the first world, you know, we're living in the West, it's as if we don't get involved. It's not that. They're not going to die of starvation. So many, when I was in Egypt, the amount of Middle Eastern charities that are there, and I've spoken to the Palestinian, you know, with Justice Minister, and there's loads of my partner who I work with, our brother Ayushimi, he's been 18 times since November, and he's created a project there. And they've told me stories of Palestinians, and it's not pretty. And it's not, it's the Gaza issue has been exploited. Let's just say that. And even before that, Syria was exploited. And even before that, because why? Because of the prophetic text. People naturally give more because the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about Sham, you know.
Yes.
Oh yeah, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned Sham, and Janayhab, the angels are over Sham. So people are like, alhamdulillah. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Well, the Prophet ﷺ goes, if the people of Sham corrupt, فَلَا خَيْرَ فِيكُمْ, like, there's no khair. And people naturally, the Prophet ﷺ said about Sham and Yemen, and people give. Kashmir don't get that much support. Unfortunately, let's call it out as it is, a spade for spade. Burma won't get that much support.
No.
But the Muslims will give.
Uyghurs won't get that support.
It won't get that traction. Gaza will. You know, Gaza, Ardu Muqaddisa, you know, Imam Shafi'i was born there, you know, the people of Palestine, and they know what they're doing. So these charities are going to be sitting on a nice, healthy gift aid by the end of this conflict. And even worse, once it's over, they're going to say, oh, we're part of the reconstruction process, or, you know, it's always going to be...
yeah, it is very depressing when you think about it.
Hard. And I'm not saying all charities, by the way, I'll have to add that. But there's a definite exploitation of this conflict.
So the takeaway is that if you are somebody in the Western world or anywhere in the Muslim world and you want to donate to the Gaza issue and help out, you should be careful. Diligent in picking out a charity if you have to.
And on top of that, not to say that look, Habibi, we're in this podcast, right? So naturally, you got your equipment here, right? If you invite me to your podcast without the equipment, it doesn't make any sense, does it?
Doesn't make any sense.
So charities, when they request money and they're going to supply, naturally, that's their job, right? So should they be praised for that? No. That's your job. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Do you understand? It's only the only reason why we praise certain charities because there's too many fraudulent ones out there. So the ones that are doing it probably go, oh, Changel.
They stick out.
They stick out because there's so much issues. So the whole issue, brother Amanullah, you know how much charities there are in the UK? Muslim charities. It's a joke. It's too much because everyone wants that piece of the pie, don't they? They want that nice, healthy gift aid. That's the incentive. I'm not saying
the gift aid, by the way, to clarify for the audience, for every £100 that
they get 25%.
They get 25 from taxpayer money.
Taxpayer money, but you have to tick the box. So that doesn't mean they get it all the time, but a lot of it is ticked.
What are the boxes that you have to
So
tick?
it's basically before you make the transaction, there's a box that says, you know, are you a UK taxpayer? We can claim back 25%, etc. You tick it, and then they claim it.
So if they get it from the UK, that's
UK.
where their campaigning must be the hardest then.
Because I don't think that happens in the UK. I spoke to a US charity. Canadian, they don't have that.
They probably get some tax rebates or something.
Some rebates, but not in
direct.
Yeah, direct. I mean, this is set in stone.
Subsidies.
Yeah, so this is set in stone. 25%. This is what you're entitled to if you're a UK taxpayer. And it's sad because we want the UK charities to be on the ground and support and give their all, but it's not.
What about other methods? Did you find that the Dawah scene was effective in organizing protests against?
Yeah.
That was helpful?
Yeah. And again, as you know, I'm not anti-protest. Yes, I've got my reservations that I don't actually take part in them.
Personally, you don't?
I don't, but I wouldn't call it like an innovation or it opposes Islam. It opposes Islam in certain aspects, but then, you know, what we say is there's a necessity.
The net khair.
Yeah, the khair, the mafsada, you know, the khair outweighs the mafsada. And it has, you know, the non-Muslim audience are basically religiously committed to the conflict. Like a lot of the protests you see, subhanAllah, I've never seen a reaction such as this in the non-Muslim lands in solidarity for Palestine. So yeah, protest, the Dawah scene have, you know, announced that there'll be a protest, tens of thousands come.
Sure.
And we have used our platform wisely. Even I even say if you go. But me personally, I don't really, because to be honest, it's sometimes, you know, rubbing shoulders with you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So leftist, it's not my forte. So that's me.
No, that's not your scene, right? You're You're an inter-Islam kind of guy.
Yeah, I keep Islamic boundaries, on principles in front of my eyes.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I think overall the diaspora is looking pretty good. They have Bro Haji on their side.
Yeah,
He's going to be there to call out whenever there's free mixing.
No, it's. I think, look, when we're looking at the Dawa scene and certain issues that, look, in the West we are facing issues, right? And there's khair, of course, abundance of khair, and I can't thank the Dawa scene enough to a certain extent, but we have to recognize there's issues, and if we don't enjoin the good and forbid the evil, I think what's going to happen is that we're going to fall into the same issues Christianity fell into, living in the West. I've got no concerns about the Islamic lands. Alhamdulillah, we have an Islamic environment, we have an Islamic society. Yes, affected, but I don't think the Islamic lands would ever end up being like the West. Like, I've got enough assurance it won't be like that.
Not yet, they won't.
Not in my lifetime, I hope. But I think with the Islamic awakening that we're having, alhamdulillah, there's khair. But in the West, I think moving forward, there needs to be a strategy. We need to obviously educate. We need to educate the masses, but at the same time, don't be shy to be, or call things out as much as you can. Because if you cater to too much, what happens is when you do eventually, stand up tall and you start dealing with issues hands-on or direct, they'll say, what's going on here? Only God can judge me. Or, haram police. And that's where, you got to be direct from the start. So that if someone abuses Islamic principles and guidelines, that Muslims are out there that the hisbah, like they say, that the Deen of Islam is preserved in that sense.
Bro Haji, you have a message for the audience? Do you want?
My Pakistani audience, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, or in my Muslim countries, should I say? It's beautiful coming back, meeting Muslims from our lands, our roots, and I do encourage Muslims to visit your motherlands, keep a connection to them, and at the same time spread da'wah, give a positive, impact, because in the day we all need guidance and we all need to be reminded. So bi'idhnillah Kareem, Pakistan, I love you, and to my Muslim lands, I love you also, and inshallah Islam will prosper and we will have good times ahead, bi'idhnillah Kareem.
Inshallah. Thank you, Brother Haji, for your time.
Allah very
I hope that's been a good conversation.
No, beautiful, loved it. Thanks for the invite. Allah
Thank you, brother. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.